Forget all the silly talk of bogey teams and what happened 4 weeks ago at Mount Smart. If the Wars are that awful again and turn up as insipid an attitude as that night again, they'll deserve to lose.
Like at the moment, you still got the 8 working itself out. It's got to be the last round where you find out where you finish. But with the Warriors, they go to the Titans, they go to Parramatta, they play Manly. 3 games they should win.
It doesn't matter what Penrith do, whether they beat the Raiders or not. You're still inside the top 4 with 2 to play and fate in your own hands again.
Welcome to the DSPN.
Team New Zealand's in trouble. Oh, he's done it again. Ricky heard it.
The Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome to the podcast, people. Martin Devlin, Lachlan Ward, DSPN. It's BLT. That means Big League Tuesday. Tony Kemp with us. Shortly, a sermon on the Warriors. Can we, us, make the top 4? I do believe so, and I'm going to explain exactly why. Rugby. Scott Robertson fronting a press conference out of Argentina this morning. We were at that press conference asking a couple of questions. We'll bring you a whole lot of quotes and thoughts from Coach Scott Robertson about the All Blacks post-first test, heading into the second test. And Chris Jones for a UK perspective. So, South Africa get beat by the Oz, All Blacks, comfortable scoreline, and a bit of a muddling performance against Argentina at Cordoba. What do they think of it up there in that hemisphere? All of that to come on the podcast, wherever you are listening. Rover, if you're watching on Spotify, video, Apple Podcasts, DSPN YouTube channel, keep clicking that subscribe button for us on the YouTube channel. We appreciate you very much. And keep commenting. We're getting so much feedback at the moment, trying to reply to you as often as we possibly can. We'll have a comment corner, a feedback forum episode in the next couple of days for you. We begin the show same way every day. Come on down, Warriors.
Marty Sermons brought to you by WebWonks. Generate online leads with WebWonks. Doctors for your Google data.
We live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots.
The Warriors are back inside the top 4, 3 rounds to go. Can the club maintain that spot and finish ahead of the chasing pack? I believe so. Yes. Because the next 3 fixtures are very winnable. And if you look at those around the Warriors, those clubs and who they will have left to play, the simple answer to me is it is very achievable. Of course, these matches now have to be won, and hopefully victory over the Dragons is the catalyst for all of that to happen. It wasn't a great performance, but it was 2 points, and at this stage of the season, that's all that counts. Next 3 games then, Titans away, Eels at home, Manly away. The Titans, I will repeat, are a rubbish side and simply must be beaten. Forget all the silly talk of bogey teams and what happened 4 weeks ago at Mount Smart. Look, if the Wars are that awful again and turn up as insipid an attitude as that night again, they'll deserve to lose. But surely the incentive, the top 4 carrot that is now still dangling, is motivation enough to play like they have to win, which is exactly where they're at. To finish top 4, they got to win out. Play like they did versus the Dragons, as messy and unconvincing as it was at times. And I think the Titans are a gimme 2 points. They should be. The Titans have shipped over 100 points in the 3 weeks since that win. They are bottom for a reason. That's because they're a crap side. They need to be put away. Then it's the Eels, who themselves have been quite competitive these last 4 weeks. They beat the Broncos, lost to the Storm narrow, beat the Cowboys, lost to the Rabbits. Every game decided by 6 points or less, 74 points conceded in 4 games. Let's do the maths. Less than 20 a game, and that's pretty impressive. But again, in 2 weeks' time, the penultimate round, they have 0 to play for. They can't finish last. Are they really going to go full on for 80 minutes just because? Or will their minds be more on Mad Monday? Same for Manly. A faint, very faint mathematical possibility they might finish 8th. But most probably they won't. So how motivated are those guys going to be knowing there's nothing to play for except injuries on the last round of the season? Penrith, 1 point adrift of the Warriors, have the Raiders, Dogs, St. George. Broncos have the Knights, Cowboys, and then the Storm to finish with. Sharks have the bye, Knights, and then Dogs in the final round. And that's a Bulldog side themselves needing to win and keep winning. So it is poised. It is set up perfectly for the Warriors to finish on a roll. Will they do it, though? That's a more relevant question, I think, than can they. Will they? This team isn't playing anyone in the 8 in the final 3 games. The opponents are 17th, 14th and 10. These teams are there for the taking. So my questions are, can the Warriors win out? Can we keep that top 4 spot? How vital that 2 points versus St. George? And is that scratch you in just the confidence boost needed to finish the season with a flourish and march, not crawl, into the finals. Because the Warriors have already made the 8. Where they finish is now entirely up to the team. They control their own destiny. Win out, it's top 4. And that's the best thing about it. The Warriors players now get to decide their own fate.
Devlin.
Big League Tuesday, we're talking Warriors, we're talking top 4, we're talking who's going to make the 8, we're talking who can stay in that top 4. Tony Kemp, former Warriors coach, very proud Kiwi, 25 tests for our country, and of course played his pro league in both hemispheres, and still recovering from that knee surgery, and we showed you the picture last week. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, Marty, look, it's been a pretty torrid week, actually. Got out of hospital on Sunday, and yeah, like you said, good word for it, recovery. But yeah, happy to get it done. You know, their old injuries flared up, and just had to get in there and sort it out. So back on deck, mate. Looking forward to the run in the next 3 weeks at least, to see where everyone ends up on this table, because by my calculation, there's still 9 or 10 teams that can make it.
Look, just before we get into that, I've got a lot of questions about it. I've got the points table in front of me, and there's just so many permutations that could happen here. You know, a lot of you guys who played in that era carry injuries for the rest of your life, and it's not just the physical injuries, it's the mental, you know, the head knocks as well, and the psychological trauma from all of that kind of thing. Do you find, like, when you go back to England and you talk to all your old mates and that there's a lot of them that are now actually at the stage where they go, I'm not going to kind of pretend anymore, I'm not going to limp around anymore, I've actually got to get some life back? Because it's really important, mate. You provide so much pleasure for the rest of us, you guys, and I always find it really sad to see. I remember a call that you had with KT on Radio Sport years ago, mate, and he was really struggling, and I love that guy. I worked with him at Dunlop's a lot of years back, and he played squash against him, and one of my heroes when I was growing up was KT, and I always remember that interview you did with him and how sad I felt afterwards, and I just think a lot of the old guys are a bit like that, aren't they?
Yeah, look, geez, Marty, it's a really good subject that you raise. You know, like it's not the football career. You know, like when you think about it, the football career is quite a short career. You know, I had one of the longer careers, playing 14 years as a pro, and then going into coaching, administration, and so on. But you know, it's not the career; it's the trauma before the career. Because most of us come out of, you know, a lower socio-economic background. We're looking for a way out, so we've got lots of mental issues to start with before we get into that football career, and then you reach the highs of playing for your country and so on, and you come out of the back end of it, and like you sit here today and you wonder, shit, now was it really worth it? You know, a couple of new knees, a new shoulder, and you know, the head knocks and so forth. And as you said, you know, you're pointing out players like the era just before me now, where dementia is just common chat these days. So I guess the question, is it really worth it? Look, I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Wow. You know, I can still smell the grass when I wake up in the morning, and you know, look forward to listening to the radio saying that the games are on, having this dream, this I guess aspiration to reach heights that you don't ever watch on telly. And people always ask me, would you do it again? Of course. The only thing I would do is I'd actually do it with this head on my shoulder and not my 16, 17-year-old head on my shoulder, where doctors said you needed an operation. You go and get it, you know, piece of bodily part removed and pay for that because you didn't understand what was going to do to you later on. And I think what you can look at these days is, you know, we saw it on the weekend, you know, when St. George played the Warriors, you had 3 HIAs, you know, you got like serious concussions, being taken off, not allowed back into the game. Like back in my day,
you were back on.
But famous cliche, it's like get up and get back in the line. You know, you got to show a face, and we'll deal with that after the game with a beer, and you'll be right to go again next week. So I think things are changing, Marty, for the better. But you know, you got to remember it's a collision sport. You choose that sport. There is always going to be, I guess, biomechanics that play a part in it. When you get caught, you know, there's a couple of knee injuries on the weekend. Look at Cameron McInnes for Cronulla, goes down, he's out for the season. Yeah. And you've got to be, I guess, you've got to realise that later on in life that those are actually going to come back and you're going to pay the price for it. And unfortunately for me, that's, you know, part of it was I had a really bad knee injury in my career, and I've always known that this day would come. Now it's about recouping. I still think I've got a good 20, 30 years left in me. And those 20, 30 years, I want to make sure that I can enjoy them.
Yeah, God, she's sitting there shrugging and going, 30 bloody years of him left. I'm only kidding. The other thing I was just going to make quick mention of is I watched, and I know it's been out for a while, but I only just watched it a couple of weeks ago, is Sharky, the Mark Graham film that his son made. What a great doco that is, man. And you know, if anyone ever asked me who's my favourite league player, Mark Graham straight away, every time. You know, even with all of the new players, and and I loved Inglis and I love Meningo, I love all these guys, but Mark Graham is my number one player ever, forever. And I'm so glad that I grew up in an era where I got to see him play live and all of that. And the footage doesn't really show you how great a player he was.
No, and it was great. You know, I grew up watching him. You know, and, I was lucky enough to get in a change room when I was 14 when they played a couple of tests up at Carlisle Park. You know, I'm just thinking how great it would be just to be sitting in that shed with a black jersey on, and I got to play against Mark at North Sydney. And in fact, it was the first time I actually damaged my knee was in that game at North Sydney Oval. I just remember looking over in the tunnel. You walk out from underneath the ground at North Sydney Oval, Marty, and Mark Graham standing in the front there holding the ball, and I'm 19 at the time, and I'm just thinking, man, that's Mark Graham, you know, like an absolute legend of New Zealand Rugby League, and all I could think in my head was, geez, I hope he doesn't run down my side today. I have to bloody try and tackle him. But yeah, so it's sort of those guys, you know, they sort of, for me, they were the trailblazers. We never, there's so much in this conversation.
Yeah, there is. I know. We could talk about this.
You look at the international game today. You're talking about Tanah and Samoa and all these Payne Haas last week deciding to go and play for Samoa. You know, for me, that really goes back to the likes of Olsen Filipina and Fred Arcoy. You know, you've got the likes of Kevin and Harry Tamata. You've got the likes of Mark Graham. You know, they're the trailblazers. They're the guys that say, you know, if you really want to reach these heights, here's how you do it. And they gave blokes like me, which were the next generation, an opportunity to turn professional and play in a professional sport. And then you look at it today, and I don't begrudge any of these players that are getting $1 million today, man. I still think they're underpaid.
Yeah, well, no, I think, look, you deserve, look, and the other thing I noticed really is how the game has browned. You know, the browning of the game from back when you look at that footage from the 80s and 90s, and you look at a game of rugby league now, and the Polynesian, Māori, the South Pacific influence, it is the NRL now. It's like Afro-American basketball has taken over completely the NBA, and that's that sport now, and this is what it is. It's joyous to see, mate. You know, but it's a real change. You can see the sea change when you just watch over the decades, can't you?
Yeah, well, of course, in the Indigenous round last week, you could see that the NRL buying into, you know, that would never have happened back in my day. You know, like, you know, it was Jimmy Barnes and Cole Chisel. There was nothing of that. You know, they used to call it jungle music. What do you listen to that jungle music if you listen to a bit of rap or a bit of R&B, you know?
Yeah.
There was a lot of systemic racism in the Australian camps back in those days.
Was it nasty though? Was it nasty though, Tony, or was it just more ignorance more than anything else?
It was more ignorance. You know, and you know, I was young too, so I really didn't understand it. I was more into, you know, well, I'll show you, you know, like this is what I can do. And but when you you know, got the head on your shoulders these days, you look at it, and I did, money, like when I watched what you know, the Warriors did on Friday night, and then I watched all, you know, like lay up in bed in the hospital. You only do one thing, watch football.
Yeah, it's watching telly.
I was sitting there, you know, like a tinge of proudness about, you know, these the Indigenous are being recognised, and about bloody time. You know, it's 2025.
Cool.
So. You're right about the branding of the game, Marty. It's, you know, 30, close to 40% in the NRL, over 50% across all grades. It's growing. They've got no choice. The branding of the game, it happened in the NBA, in the baseball. It's the same thing that's going on.
Yeah.
The only place we haven't really seen it go on is the coach, you know, and the Rooney Rule, where, you know, the coaching staff they're still not being recognised in that as far as the Pacifica goes. So I think that'll change, Marty. I think you know, eventually just weight of numbers that's going to happen, but it is a really interesting space at the moment. Like I said, you've asked a question that can open up a whole box of rooms.
Yeah, well, look, what we'll do is we'll save this conversation and we'll have it and we'll elongate it. We'll get you in and we'll talk about this because it certainly deserves to be talked about all the time. I think it's got to be recognised. And you're right with the Indigenous round. Let's just go back because you did mention the Dragons game. And look, I've read a lot about this. I've read a lot online about this. I've talked a lot about this to a couple of mates and things. And it wasn't a great performance, sure. And maybe the Dragons were really unlucky, and they're certainly unlucky with their injuries. None of that I care about. The only thing I care about is what that final score was. And I started the show by saying, look, the Warriors are back inside the top 4, and you've made mention of this a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, of having it in your own hands, of having fate in your own hands. There can't be any bigger incentive now for those players. One of the comments that was made to me, and it was made to me by somebody who doesn't watch a lot of rugby league over the weekend, said, God, they don't look as though they're having a lot of fun at the moment at the beginning of that game. Normally the Warriors guys are, they're all happy and everything else. I said, this is what happens when you lose. When you lose 5 or 7 games or something. I'm hoping, in a long-winded way, asking you whether just the confidence you get from putting a W up on the board back inside the top 4, then knowing, hey, if we go beat the Titans, we stay inside the top 4. Surely that's got to be all the incentive they need this weekend.
Oh, look, and we've spoken about it a number of times this year. The competition for the Warriors this year is and how it's played out as far as the teams go that they've got left to play. They've got the easiest run home. So
no question.
When you look at it from a points perspective, I would tend to think that you could go out and win every game. You've got the Titans, you've got Parramatta, you've got Manly.
Yep.
Geez, they were terrible on the weekend. In 3 games that, if you're sitting in Penrith or Melbourne's camp, you go all these 6 points will bank it. So, and I think that's where the discrepancy is, Marty. When you're looking at the Melbourne Penrith game on Friday, Thursday night, and I'm texting you going, man, like, this is a game we've got to the finals already. Yeah. It had everything in it, controversy, the theatre, the tries, and then you sort of watch the Warriors struggle along on the Friday night, but you're just riding the home. For me, I don't care how they won. I don't really care how they won. They won. And that's the most important thing. Like when you're at this, it's like, you're just about to come out onto the big stage and the doors opened, and you can see it and you can feel it, and you're just about there. You lose that game on Friday night against St. George, and they were losing their game. Like they had a lot of luck to go their way. The HIAs, the way they stuffed up with the A-Needs man. And the Warriors deserve some luck. We've had enough of our bad luck over the years. The thing that got me was they just did not give in. Yeah. St. George, you could see the petrol running out of their tanks. They had no bench. The big guys, they ended up with Cook and Cuthbertson in the middle of the park. And you knew the Warriors were going to start rolling through them, getting on the front foot. Pompey scores a couple of tries in the back end. Hey, that's life. And they were good enough to do it. So when you look at it that way, you go, well, hey, it might have been ugly, but you stuck to your system. That's it. You hung in there. Yeah. And in the end, you got the win, which was more important than what anyone else is going to say. And you trusted
the processes and the systems as well, which is why I go in with confidence to this next game, because the Titans are a rubbish side, and I don't care about bogey terms, and I don't care about the fact they won at Mount Smart. This is a side with nothing to play for now. I look in 2 weeks' time and look at the Eels and go, okay, yeah, they've had some pretty good form over the last 4 weeks, but they got nothing to play for in 2 weeks. Unless Manly produce a mathematical miracle, by the time that last game rolls around, they got Mad Monday to look forward to, and they got nothing to look forward to. So it is in the Warriors' hands now, not to get too far ahead, but to first take care of business against the Titans. It doesn't matter what Penrith do, whether they beat the Raiders or not. You're still inside the top 4 with 2 to play and fate in your own hands again. And so, and all of these seasons are always a roller coaster, mate. I mean, there are very few teams that go through the whole season, maybe in Melbourne, maybe the Raiders this year, who don't have some really dark moments. Look at the Panthers at 3-7, Tony. Everyone was questioning them. But now, they're in 5th spot. They may not make top 4. So I think the incentive for the Warriors has just got to be go to the Titans and win the bloody game. And it doesn't matter whether it's ugly like against St. George. But I think you're right. It's just the determination and the tenacity to hang in that game. Because it could have gone the same way as the Dolphins game a couple of weeks ago. Could have lost it in the last second, right? But they didn't. Yeah. Sloan came on. They didn't. They actually won the game. So that's what I care about at this time of year.
Yeah, look, I said to you, Marty, Sloan comes on, scores the winning try. That was when they lost those 2 players. And he makes that break. I was thinking he's going to take him on. He's got some speed, and he just wasn't in the game. Poor decision to pass that ball so early. I think when you look at the other teams, Marty, like at the moment you've still got the 8 working itself out. It's got to be the last round where you find out where you finish. But with the Warriors, they go to the Titans, they go to Parramatta. They play Manly. are 3 games they should win.
Should win,
you know.
yeah.
And for me, I think, you know, the slow start over the last couple of weeks, I think they got caught up in the hype of the Indigenous round. Like, it was a long beat up at the beginning of the game. You know, they started slow, they were losing the ground. I think for me, like, it's just like, forget about anything now. Just start the game really well and start to bury teams early, because who you're playing, like you said, are teams that want Mad Monday to come around quick. And if you can bury them early, like you saw the Titans on the weekend, the game's over.
The game was over,
you know, that game, the Titans were never going to get back into that game. But if you give them a sniff, and this is the thing with the Titans and the Parramatters, if you give them a sniff, they got Kieran Foran at halfback, they got Mitchell Moses at halfback, they're David Shearer's at halfback. If they get a sniff, they want to go out on a, you know, they're all up to you know,
contracts to play for. Yeah,
Foran's 3 games at home now before he retires. David Cherry Evans, it's talk about who's retiring, his last name is at home. And of course, you've got Mitchell Moses, who just loves it when his team's winning. You've got to take that away from them. So you've got to put the asset on them, put some points on them, and then put them to bed. Like, stop making it go right down to the wire. Because the 3 teams you're playing in the next 3 weeks, they actually want out. They're done.
Look, let's look at the top of the table, because that game on Thursday night was terrific, wasn't it? And there is such a gap between when those teams play like that and the rest. And, you know, I look at what happened in 2023, where the Warriors got inside the top 4, but were smoked by Penrith. I think, Newcastle beat Newcastle, smoked again by Brisbane. And the gap was 30 points between those teams. Do you still see it being like that? Do you still see those A-League teams of the Raiders, the Storm, the Panthers? The Dogs are a little up and down at the moment, but let's include them. Are they that much better still than everyone else?
Oh no! Look, I don't, Marty. I think what you're seeing at the moment is a team's time in their run. You know, you're talking about the better coaches too. Like, look at Sydney City. You know, they come up against Canterbury last week, and
what a result!
Like, that was a hell of a game. You know, it was a battle in the middle. They go in a Tupou, you know, Tofe out on that right edge for Canterbury, had no answer to the kick. Sammy Walker's just playing outside his skin, and they're sitting in 8th position at the moment. Got some really good games, and they can still finish in the 4. You know, so I think there's those scores in the game, but I think when it comes down to the top 4 playing out, the top 8 playing out, I think we've got a really good final series coming up. It's just, for me, I'm not really worried about those other teams. For me, it's where do the Warriors finish? You know, so they're in the 8, so that game
that's
fine.
banked, yep.
Mathematically they can miss it, which is God reckons a miracle for them to miss it now. But it's where do they finish? Because you can still finish as high as 2nd. That's the funny thing about this. So they could be playing off for a week off in the second round.
Crazy.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you could also finish down in 6th or 7th. So you've got a lot of teams in that top 8 that are like that at the moment. But when you're looking at the draw, and that's all I'm looking at as far as the Warriors go, I'm expecting them to go to the Titans and give them a right.
I hope so. Yeah, I think they have to. I think, you know, they've been handed. It's almost like a lifeline with that St. George result, isn't it? And that's what I'm hoping that it actually does for the players. That it actually just says to them, hey, you know, destiny lies with us now. You know, you can talk as much as you like, but just go out and win the game. And then the next week you're still in that position with 2 to go, still in that top 4. Tanah Boyd, how good to see him running, and how important is it, that aspect of the Warriors game? Because he was a little reserved in the first couple of games that he was playing, did a lot of kicking in that. But ball in hand, the guy has actually got something, and I just wonder whether he's been given that go by Webby to say, hey, look, mate, back yourself from here. Hopefully that's the confidence boost he needs.
Yeah, look, when you're looking, I'll take you back to the Melbourne game on Thursday night. Young Wishart playing over 7 jerseys. The amount of times he got tackled on tackle 4, tackle 5, you know. So he'd come out of yardage if he needed to carry off Harry Grant. He takes one off the ruck and goes behind the ruck and gets tackled. So all of the good halfbacks, the Hughes, the Clearys and all that, they know when to run and when to get tackled. There's no problem with a halfback getting tackled, Marty. You know what I mean? You don't have to just pass the ball and kick the football when you need it for a run. These days, like I said to you last week, I think you play. We used to play set-up plays. You play every play as it happens in front of you. And if those runs that you're talking about were on the back of 3 HIAs, they were going backwards St. George at that period of the game, and he was getting the ball on the front foot, and he needed to run it, soak those yards up, because what came behind it were the really good plays. Even on the last one, the young boy went down the blind and hit Pompey to score that, try to put him in front. So is there more running in Tanah Boyd? depends on your forward pack. Losing Jackson for the rest of the year isn't going to help.
No.
It's still a simple game. If you look at the best teams, they just go in through the middle of the park. Harry Grant showed you, Cleary showed you, they're like two prize fighters on Thursday night, Melbourne and Penrith, just punching the diseases out of each other until someone broke. That's where we're headed to when we get around to the finals, and we want to be really good at it. And at the stage, given the luck that we had on Friday night against St George when they lost their 3 players, we weren't that good at it. We were losing. We were getting jabbed, and they're ready to throw the knockout punch. It seemed the only problem was they knocked themselves out and helped us out. So, come this week against Titans. For me, Marty, it's like, forget about the media, forget about what people are saying. It's all in your hands. Just go out there, bury it early, and make sure you go on with it. Get some confidence. You've got 3 weeks to build before you get to the finals.
DSPN.